Kevin Hermening?
So listen, this behavior is something that has gone on way too long, been tolerated way too long by a group of people who are the most disrespectful, intolerant citizens and people who aren't citizens of the state of Wisconsin. I would imagine that if you talked to the average person in these protest groups, that they would describe the governor and his administration as fascist. But the technical term, definition of the term fascist ideology is one that consistently invokes the primacy of the state. Now, these protesters oppose this state government, but I'm pretty sure that they would very much raise up the primacy of their state as they would seek to decide and define it. And so how does Ed and others think that the police are supposed to deal with protesters who won't follow the law in simply paying for a permit or, requesting a permit in advance? I didn't even know there was a fee. I don't think there's a fee for it. Clearly, somebody should have to pay anyone who's responsible for damaging the Capitol, any public property. And what are they so unwilling to share the property with? I read an article this week of a reporter, a former citizen of the state of Wisconsin from New York, who said that she traveled back to show solidarity, and she couldn't quite understand why people were being arrested in this process. And she also claimed that they were exiting the Capitol regularly when permitted groups were trying to show up for their events and activities. And we all know that that isn't true because weddings have been planned and the protesters wouldn't leave, so the weddings had to leave. And so it's an unfair characterization to suggest that the police are being overbearing by a bunch of bullies unwilling to simply share the state resources with all citizens and behave in a tolerant, normal manner. And I'm surprised that there hasn't been true violence by people who are getting sick and tired and fed up with the behavior of the protesters, who obviously have nothing else more productive to do to improve our state and our society and improve the lots of people who are, quite frankly, still looking for jobs and trying to improve education in this state.
Democratic State
Kevin,
Representative...
Hold on. I mean, I'm still trying to get my head around what Kevin just said.
Don't be a bully, Ed. Don't join the bullies. You're part of the bully group if you support their behavior.
Yeah, well, aside from your characterizing the protests in one fell swoop as a bunch of fascists, let's remember, Kevin, that the birth of the Tea Party movement, so beloved of the current Republican establishment in this state and nationwide, was a bunch of people disrupting town hall forums on health care policy and taking over and disrupting the forum and screaming and yelling. And a lot of people weren't happy about that, Kevin, but that's democracy, and they supported the right of those individuals to speak out. And I think that for you to be very selective in who has the right to speak out and protest and who doesn't is unfortunately reflective of a real blind spot on your part. The Constitution guarantees that right for everyone, Kevin, not just for the groups we agree with.
I just suggested they needed to follow the rules, and I have attended and been a part of and spoken at a number of Tea Party organizations, and in every single case, I have seen the permits that were purchased to gather in city parks and in public buildings. So don't tell me there's a comparison between the Tea Party going out and purchasing permits in some cases or receiving them after a proper application, and the bullies that are commonly disregarding the other people's rights in the state capitol.
No, the difference is that when you have a...
Have you ever heard of a Tea Party person being arrested, Ed? No.
There's a big difference, Kevin. A public protest or parade in the outside with a large group of people can be permitted under the Constitution. But the Capitol is not the public space. The Capitol is a public space. It's not equivalent to a public park. It is a public space where protests have occurred for a very long time. It is considered a public forum under the Constitution, and greater free speech rights under the First Amendment take place in the state capitol than in a park across the street. That's simple constitutional doctrine, and any lawyer could tell you that and explain that to you. And unfortunately, what we have here is an attempt by the Walker administration to impose policies without regard to longstanding First Amendment doctrine, without caring about First Amendment doctrine, and that's where they're overreaching, Kevin.
Democratic State Representative Sandy Pope of Middleton says she was threatened with arrest this week for simply being an observer at the noontime sing-along. Kevin, is that going a little too far?
Anybody who is not purchasing or receiving a permit to continually violate the law or the administrative rules in the state capitol should receive the same treatment whether they're an elected official or not. She has a responsibility to follow the rules that have been put down. I don't know why, it apparently is so onerous on the part of liberals and progressives to ask for a permit, just like it's so onerous for people to ask for or receive, to pay for if they can or are required to, or if they can't afford to have and request for free an ID to go and vote. The hypocrisy of the people on the left never ceases to amaze me.
So hang on. So if you happen to be in the Capitol when this protest is occurring and you're just watching it, then you should get a permit for that? Is that what you're suggesting? I just want to be clear.
What I'm telling you is that she actually became part of the solidarity sing-along, despite the fact that she wasn't singing. She was still part of the group, and we know that from the video that's been released. So yes, if she's part of it, just because she wasn't opening her mouth, she was still part of the protest that was going on. She wasn't simply observing up from the second deck, uninvolved and disinterested.
Ed Fallone?
Well, this is really what's the fundamental concern here. People have a First Amendment right. The Supreme Court has been very clear that permits cannot be required for small groups. Initially, this policy that was proposed by the Walker administration applied to groups as small as 4 people. It's very clear under Supreme Court precedent, established constitutional doctrine, you cannot require a group of 4 people, a group that small, to get a permit in advance. There's absolutely no justification for it. The justification for a permit is to allow for security and to allow for, the minimization of disruption. A peaceful protest, and of course, none of this applies to people throwing bricks, but a peaceful protest of 4 people does not raise security concerns, does not cause a disruption. The Supreme Court has been very clear on this. So what we have here is an attempt to blur the issues and say, oh, you have to follow the rules. Well, you don't have to follow unconstitutional rules. That's why we have a constitution. We could pass a rule requiring all handgun owners to turn in their handguns, and Kevin would scream and yell about the Second Amendment doesn't allow you to pass that rule. Same thing applies when you try and take away someone's free speech rights. You can't do it. The Constitution doesn't allow it, and the Walker administration